Hello, hello, beautiful ones, and welcome. It's Monday, right? It's Monday, and you know what that means. It's Monday with Muktananda. So, we have a special request today. Somebody sent me a question that she would like responded to or just explored and discussed, because last time we did Monday with Muktananda, we explored the concept of evil within the human experience. And this person's question is kind of curious about the presence of evil or darkness or shadow or whatever you want to call it, in kind of a more spiritual exploration of it. So I'm going to read her question and then we can talk about, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Muktananda. So she gives she's been reading a book called Caste. And I don't know if you have heard of it.
I've read it. Yes, by Isabel Wilkerson.
Okay. So, which goes into detail describing torture in the U.S. of slaves on plantations, lynchings, Jews in Nazi Germany, etc. And in the reading of this and kind of educating herself about it, she is wondering about, well, she has these questions. She says, to be a torturer, one must overcome certain innate tendencies for empathy and compassion. What is it in the human spirit that allows humans to act like sadists, where they go overboard in torture, and barbarians? And what is that? Why is that shadow there? What can we do to heal that in humanity? And this has been a curiosity and wondering of mine as well, because I'm so far on the empathic end of the spectrum that I'm listening to a book right now called My Grandmother's Hands, educating myself better about racism. And he gave a practice of describing that basically a torture of an animal. And I had to stop the book. I was listening to it. I stopped the recording. I had to take a break for the whole day. I started to cry. Like, I literally experienced that as though it happened in front of me. I experienced that as well with human torture and mistreatment, neglect, abuse. And so it is so impossible for me to have an understanding or wrap my mind around how does one get to the place where they can so fully disconnect from recognizing the value of another life, from recognizing that we don't have a right to bring harm to others. It's overwhelming to even contemplate. So I'm hoping you have some way of helping us understand this better. Go for it.
Wow, that's a really, really good question and a serious one. The only way I have to create context for answering the question. And one of the things that I teach and demonstrate is that we humans are multidimensional, so that we exist not just in the physical plane, but simultaneously in the mental, the emotional, the etheric, and in our light bodies. And I refer to those different states as the third, which is the physical dimension, the fourth dimension, which some people call the astral plane, and then the fifth dimension, which is when we are in our light bodies. And there are other dimensions beyond that, but these ones are really relevant for our concern. So in this third dimension, in this physical life and the world as we experience it right now, it's functioning at a very, very low frequency. By that, and I said, if we're in a state of light, our light bodies, we're in a very much higher frequency of love and light. So the further we move away from that creates a little bit of context, okay? So now, in my latest book, Anthropocene, I have a chapter called The Biology of Love. There you are. And in it, we're building upon the work of one of my mentors, Umberto Martorana, who says that love is a recognition of the other as a legitimate other. So he's not saying there's no room for feeling in there. Love, but love is a state of mind, a state of consciousness in which you recognize the other as legitimate. So anytime you move away from that and you're in an us versus them state of mind, then the other person is not perceived as legitimate. And in some cases, not even human. So there's whole political systems and philosophies and beliefs that are based on some people perceive others as not, some others as not being human. And if you don't perceive them to be human, then you're not, it's a state of mind where you cannot have necessarily empathy. That's one way of looking at it. Now, where does that come from? Well, one thing, if you look at our lives, which are greatly influenced by the emotional state and mental state and our beliefs, which, okay, we can see that our beliefs are inculcated into us as children, usually, from our parents and from family. That's one way. The other way, though, is if you are recognizing that we are not just multidimensional beings, but that we have incarnated into this dimension, not necessarily this planet, but other physical dimensions in different lifetimes, then we carry certain imprints. In Sanskrit, they call it samskaras. And they carry forward with us into this lifetime because we haven't resolved them. But they're fourth dimensional or astral plane influences that are dictating to a great extent people's behavior without them necessarily being aware of it. That's why if you're going to evolve spiritually or otherwise, you need to develop mental, emotional mastery so that we are aware of the choices we're making. They're not just subconscious beliefs that are habitual and creating the patterns in our lives that we see. And we see this in people in relationships. They get out of one relationship, and before you know it, they're in another dysfunctional relationship because the pattern hasn't shifted. Okay, so what does that have to do with evil? Evil is just at a very, very lower frequency. Okay, and if you don't see the other as a legitimate other, and you've got all kinds of psychological terms, you can call a person a psychopath or sociopath, or but if they can't see the other as a legitimate other, and they themselves are operating at a very low frequency, which we can say from a place of consciousness is a place of suffering and fear. And then that gets institutionalized in what we're living in a patriarchal culture. So I can go on and on and on, not to justify it. I'm not going to sit here and try to justify it, but I can try to create perhaps a framework, a context for seeing how this might affect certain people.
Well said. So there must also be like an override of some sort that prevents the natural state of human compassion from guiding behaviors and actions. Is that?
Well, wait, when you say that again, I'm trying to understand. What makes you think there is a natural override?
Well, for somebody that are torturing others, killing others, maiming others, humans have a natural tendency towards love and compassion. And so I'm wondering, is this like a switch and override? I'm not going to feel that. I'm not going to behave in accordance with that. Or is it a total absence of that component of compassion and love that allows for them to behave in that way, or a combination?
Well, I mean, you can look at how a child is brought up. Some children are brought up in horrific circumstances where there is a total lack of love, and how that imprints that person and how that can influence their behavior. I'm sure there are behavioral scientists who can talk about that much more competently than I, but you can imagine how a person can be so beaten down and living in absolute fear and hatred that they would just act it out. So, I mean, that's and when you're living in an age of darkness, lower frequency, as we are right now, there's more proclivity for that. And I think we're seeing it more and more. So in the Hindu cycles, they call this the age of the Kali Yuga, the dark age, which by implication is there's going to lead to a golden age, a Satya Yuga. But that doesn't necessarily help us. It just shows that we're in a very dark period right now. And so all of these darker tendencies are being amplified. And then people are acting out. I mean, look at what happened in Atlanta last week with the killing of 8, I think 6 of them were Asian women. Hate, it's a hate crime, it's a sex crime, it's all of that. And we're going to see more and more of that.
Yeah, and we have been.
Yeah.
It's fairly regular now. Okay, so our role, I believe you would say, is to continue to take responsibility for our energy hygiene so that our point of light of attraction, what we're emanating, is as high a frequency as possible. Because those of us who are here right now a lot of us are recognizing and stepping into the sole purpose that we and choice that we made in coming forward now to be of the transformation of what is being birthed, the golden age, as you say, right?
Well, yes, but how do you do that? And here's my experience. As you transcend our ego-based self to a point where we're operating from a higher state of consciousness, then what's left for you to do? If you're no longer filling your life up with yourself, your identity as self, then what's left except to serve humanity, to serve the planet, serve the animals, to all living creatures in our own unique way. That's how we manifest it. I mean, in fact, that's the only way you maintain that state of consciousness in the third dimension. I suppose you could go to the Himalayas and just meditate all the time. And I actually know one guru, he's no longer alive, but who did that for many, many years. But he was also very active in his ashram, but he spent 10 years at least in a cave, just simply meditating, purifying, elevating consciousness, etc. But that's not something that most of us can do or even want to do. So the way I experience it is, how can I contribute to making this my life as in service to humanity in some small area that I can impact? And the more of that, and that's how it keeps me, that's how I remember what I really am. You see, we think that there's one of the great fallacies in this country, in the US, is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We think that we can actually pursue happiness. But in terms of consciousness, happiness shows up when we're no longer pursuing it. Because who is the pursuer? And to what end? Self-gratification. But there's no end to the amount of self-gratification that the ego can desire, and at the end achieve it, and still left with, is that all there is? So that's why service, however we decide to do it, that doesn't mean that we have to be poverty-stricken. We can be actually very affluent in the way we choose to serve, because that gives us more power to do more, to be more effective. So I don't want to attach it to some kind of principle that to be in service means you're in poverty. Not at all. You're in abundance, you're in grace, you're in fulfillment, and you are making your difference, okay? And that's how I see you maintain that state of consciousness.
Yeah. All of that. So, and thank you for distinguishing that. What would you say is the role that the patriarchal world culture plays in the maintaining of this darkness that you talk about?
Oh, it's huge. And it's insidious because it's so invisible. And when we talk about a patriarchal culture, we're talking about both men and women being immersed in it. And so that has to shift. And I wrote a chapter called Dismantling the Patriarchy, because I look at the patriarchy as actually as misogyny. And some people say, wow, that's pretty extreme, you know. But it is, again, based on a hierarchical distinction that men are above and women are subservient to men. That is the premise. And you have religions and you have philosophies that believe in that. So I call it misogyny because it's ultimately an expression of hatred of women. Now, in terms of energy, the divine feminine energy and the divine masculine energy exists in every human, men and women. But again, like so many aspects of darkness, we're not necessarily aware of it. In our light bodies, in the fifth dimension, when we are androgynous, we are in an androgynous state, and so we're still separate, but it's a dimension of total love, total life, light, purity, imagination, thoughts manifest instantly. That's a very, very high state, okay? And then, and one could argue that when we take birth in this physical world, the third dimension, it's an aspect of our androgynous self that takes birth, sometimes in the form of a man, and sometimes a male, and sometimes as a female. But right now, if you trace the history of the patriarchy, if you go back to Adam and Eve, okay? Eve is a piece of Adam, and she's the reason we humans supposedly got kicked out of the kingdom of heaven, or Eden rather, the Garden of Eden. Women, cause of our downfall, right? You look at the Catholic Church and the way in which they look at women, okay? They're either the Madonna, in which case they have to make her a virgin, and everyone else is a whore in terms of women. That's what they're saying, right? Can you imagine a matriarchal culture, okay? Because part of the transition that we're going to go through is from the patriarchal to the matriarchal. We're not going to get to the unity of both energies. And, if you want to build upon the Hegelian dialectic, right, which Marx borrowed, the thesis, the antithesis leading to a new synthesis. So the antithesis of the patriarchy would be a matriarchy. Then moving into a new synthesis of balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. So if we're going to have that balance, can you imagine a matriarchal culture coming up with celibacy as a means of realizing God? Would a matriarchal culture ever invent something as perverted as that? I'm asking you as a woman.
Of course not.
Yeah.
So, but I want to clarify something. That we are going to move. So we're at opposite ends of the spectrum. There's patriarchy or matriarchy leadership. So you're saying first we have to go all the way over to the matriarchal world culture, and then eventually we will find our way to some balance in between. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's why I'm saying that Hegel says that's how we evolve. Okay, so it's not extremes, but it helps create a framework for thinking about it. Okay, so the early feminists, Gloria Steinem, Bella Abzug, and others, they had to armor up and forge some progress from within by being the energy of the patriarchy. Not that because that's how powerful the energy was against them that they were confronting. Now we'll create more balance over time. But what I'm trying to say is that the premise of the patriarchy, like even in Hindu philosophy, there's this idea that if it weren't for women, men would be focused only on God. Okay, it's a belief. Okay, and that belief then begins to permeate every institution, okay. That's why I say it's so insidious, and so it's and it manifests as hatred underlying it, but it's so subconscious that you talk to most people and they'd say no, but that's really a way of characterizing it till you call something what it is, to realize how damaging this is to our psyche and to our spiritual evolution. And it's a big part of what we're facing now, and that has to shift if this planet is going to survive.
Yes. And do you sense that it is in the process of shifting?
Oh yeah, I do. Although it's going to look worse than better, it's because I ask myself, how the heck could Trump attract so many women? And it's because the patriarchy is embodied in so many of us, whether we're men or women, that we can't see other than through its eyes, which are affecting our thoughts and our beliefs without us necessarily being aware of it.
Yes. And it can be very subtle because it is so embodied. The experience of it can sometimes go unrecognized. I'm going to give a personal example because I find that really helps to anchor in some of what you're saying. Some months ago, you really helped me when I was in the middle of a divorce process. I was asked by a male member of my divorce team to come to our next team meeting prepared to make my husband at the time feel better about himself so that we could get through the process more efficiently. And I was so confused by the request, and also not really confused by it because of what had been already part of my experience as a woman in this culture. One of my reactions, I had a reaction of anger and disbelief. And then I had a reaction of, okay, what can I do or say to him that will soothe him so that we can move along in this process better, more smoothly. And I spoke with you and said that this was just asked of me. What am I supposed to do with it? And you said, among some other colorful language, you said that is very patriarchal. That is very exemplifying of the patriarchal culture. You know, a man is asking you to soothe the ego of this other man so that he can feel better about himself and make, you know, decisions that will support a certain process. And there's something in me when you said that, when you used the word patriarchal, like kind of braced and wanted to resist that was what was perhaps taking place. One, because I did not experience the person who asked me to do this as patriarchal in his service or in his conversations or in the way he was leading us. And I still don't. But what happened was this beautiful opportunity to call a meeting, a conversation, and speak to, this is how I received this request that was asked of me. This is how this request was not appropriate to be asked of me. This is why I'm not going to honor this request. And it was a beautiful, very healing opportunity. And I truly trust that that kind of thing, that kind of statement or request will not be made again by that person because of the awareness that was brought to it.
Yeah, well, and the most important thing is when something is pointed out to us that was hidden before, we just weren't aware of it, and it resonates, and then we can hold that state without any charge, like reaction, just okay. So it's freeing. So now you step into a more powerful version of yourself and you hold that energetic state, and it's amazing how that shifts everybody else.
Yes, I could feel that in the conversation as we were having it. I could feel that what I call spirit was filling the space and shifting the energy and softening some things through the, I felt, courageous act to speak to it. And it is, so like you said, it's insidious. So it can be very much in our faces, loud and insistent and obnoxious. And it can also be less obvious, or we can also talk ourselves out of, it's not that, it couldn't be that. This person was probably just thinking of my own best interest and trying to, you know, get me what I needed from this process. So I don't know, it's an invitation, I think.
It's kind of like manipulation absent awareness. There's a certain amount of awareness about the goal to be achieved within a patriarchal mindset, which is not visible. People are just living it. And the person is trying to do a good thing for your benefit. Okay? So you acknowledge that, and then you were able to take it to a higher level.
Mm.
And that's the thing about love, because we're all connected. And when we hold that higher vibration, it has the power to resonate with others. Just as if we hold the lower vibration, that has the power to resonate with others as well. Because we're all connected energetically. How do we raise the frequency? We only raise it by being it and then living it.
Yes. And I remember in that conversation I had with you right afterwards, you said, do you think that this man who asked you to do that would also, or has also asked your husband to do that for you? Do you think he said, make sure that at our next meeting, you make your wife feel really good, or you acknowledge, these wonderful aspects of her? And it's very clear. No, I don't
No,
think
it's not
so.
even in the awareness.
Right.
And so there's a lot of educating to go on as well.
Yeah.
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 And the
Beautiful.
opportunity for that is going to intensify, because how are you going to cope in the midst of accelerated change, intensified political divisiveness, climate change? I mean, it's going economic issues are going to show up big time. So whatever levels of comfort people have been able to retreat into, they're going to be more difficult to retreat into. And where are they going to retreat? Where are they going to go? Now, if you're in an us versus them, you're going to try to find someone to blame for your situation. There's going to be a lot of that going on. It's already going on. And irrational conspiracy theories go wild in this period. Okay. So anyway, I can get off on that topic.
Yeah. So let's anchor it. What do you sense are the two most important things right now for us to do in order to play our parts? I know you spoke of service, and absolutely, but even at a more like fundamental and basic practice or way of thinking or being, what do you find would be helpful for us to focus on as we hold space and visioning for where we would like to go?
Well, for instance, when you do some of your work, Stephanie, with a group, and in order for you to work with a person, you operate from a much higher frequency. And that frequency resonates not just with the person you're addressing, but with everyone in the group. So that is the power of holding that center. Now, how do you hold that center? You need certain practices. Who are the people you hang out with? That's somewhere you can start looking at. Like, what are the conversations you're engaged in? And are they elevating you to a place where you want to be, or are they bringing you down? Are you getting engaged in conversations which you just find totally a waste of time and not at all resonating with where you want to be? See, it's like a marriage. When the conversation ends, the relationship dies. So when you're not communicating shared values, cares, love, okay, so who are you going to have the conversations you want to have with? See, I've structured my life so I'm surrounded by people who want to be in this conversation. That alone keeps me present and operating. So who do you hang out with? Do you have any practices like meditation, which is very powerful for just getting out of yourself, being in a centered place, and allowing light and love to permeate your being? Then becoming more aware of your beliefs and changing them. Once you become aware of something, it's like a habit, and you become aware of it. Oh, now I can change that. You see, when you want to have more light in the fourth dimension, the astral plane, you got to get rid of all the stuff that's clogging it up, like unreflected beliefs and thoughts that just are there, or imprints from this life or past lives. You've got to actually deal with those. Now, that may require that you get some help. Once you become aware that that's something that, and then the more of those dissolve, then there's more space for light. And when there's more space for light, you're operating at a higher frequency. And it's kind of like, as you shift, your consciousness shifts, then everything around you shifts as well. So as the self that you are changes, the principles of coherence in which you are immersed change. See, if we look at our lives, everything that we've done, the relationships that we're in, the things that we do, those are what I call principles of coherence that keep us being this particular person. But if you want to shift that by elevating the frequency, and as that happens, you'll find that all of these other things that no longer are coherent fall away.
Yes. And I want to speak to that actually, because something I've noticed in my channelings lately for a number of clients, their higher self or their guides will come through and encourage them to get more okay with the natural spinning off of certain people that had previously been very close or in their inner circle. And I remember back when I was taking my training from a mentor years ago, she said, when you become very trusting of your intuition and you start to use it for to guide your life and lean into that is right for you. She said you can have a lot of loneliness there sometimes because the field of energy that you have been holding with others changes, and not everybody can resonate with the new frequency that you're bringing. So I'm just using that to back up what you're saying, that some will spin off, and that is beautiful and good, because what happens when things move away is it creates space, and that's either space that can be taken by those who are in closer resonance to who you are out in the world, or just space that you just get to claim and fill up for yourself, which is really quite delicious. I highly recommend it, or anything else that you could bring as your gifts to the world. But absolutely, absolutely, I agree with you.
Beautifully said.
Excellent. So on that note, I think this is a nice way to wrap up. And I thank you for your time. And I look forward to our next Monday with Muktananda conversation.
Me too. This is a pleasure. Thank you,
Thanks,
Stephanie.
Muktananda. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.